explaining whales in the desert, the oldest crystal ever found, and some rather technical mail in our mailbag. This is Genesis Week. And welcome to Genesis Week, the weekly program of creationary commentary on news, views, and events pertaining to the Origins controversy made possible by you, the supporters of Core Ottawa Citizens for Origins Research and Education. Excellence in pirate broadcasting. We set up our studios in the Quintet Coal Mine office building so we could continue to bring you the information the anti-creationists don't want you to see or hear, and giving glory to our creator while doing it. Remember, if you get lost in cyberspace, you can just punch in Wazooloo.com, that's me, or GenesisWeek.com, that's the show, and you can find us. And also subscribe to our YouTube channel to get extras like Crevo rants and full interviews with our guests. I'm your host, Ian Juby. Back in 2010, an entire herd of fossil whales was found in the middle of the desert in Chile during the excavations for a highway expansion. More than 80 skeletons were found, typically 8 meters or about 25 feet in length, though it is actually suspected there are actually hundreds of skeletons at the site. Most of the skeletons were juvenile or adult baleen whales, though there was also found fossil sperm whales, a type of extinct animal like a dolphin with tusks, a large fish related to the swordfish, and a fossil seal or sea lion. Now, it's interesting to note that it appears that almost all of these animals were air-breathing sea animals. There was also the remains of what is called the aquatic sloth found at the site. The fossils were over a kilometer in from the shore, tens of meters above what is now sea level, and clustered together in a patch about 20 meters wide and 240 meters long in multiple levels, and all in what is now the driest desert in the world. Most of the whales were buried on their backs. Some of the skeletons were even overlapping. So a study team of Chilean and Smithsonian researchers published a paper this past week attempting to explain this fossil bed. Now, of course, they interpreted it within the context of deep time and evolution, with the layers representing ages rather than a rapid sequence of events. But they too had some catastrophism involved. Because of the way the skeletons had been laid down together, and the fact that most of the whales were buried belly up, the researchers suggest that the animals were already dead when they were beached and rapidly buried. Now, because the animals were found like this in multiple layers, they concluded that it was probably toxins in the water that killed the animals. Poisons from things like algal blooms. Now, of course, you already know what I would say buried these animals, and in fact, most of you who wrote in said the same thing. How do you explain what's whales getting buried and fossilized in the desert? Worldwide flood. It's pretty simple. Now, I have very little disagreement with the researchers. I agree, the animals were most likely already dead when they were rapidly buried. I think that both the death and rapid burial of these animals were both caused by the flood. And the multiple layers were just simply multiple waves of this global scale catastrophe, with the water getting higher and higher and burying the whales and other animals. Now, even the researchers called these layers tidal flats. Again. And of course, I agree. As I've pointed out many times on this show before, you would get tidal flats laid down within hours of each other during a global flood. So these layers of whales were buried in hours, not years. It is too common to find both land and marine animals rapidly killed and buried together. In this case, there was a giant sloth found buried among the whales. Now, during the worldwide flood, there would have been copious amounts of toxins getting into the floodwaters and air in certain areas because of all the underwater volcanism, for example. This would kill both marine and land animals, as well as marine animals which breathe air, and it would do it quickly, with the rapidly rising floodwaters and swells subsequently burying them all together in tidal flats. The model of a worldwide flood explains the incredible fossil find quite beautifully. Many of you intrepid reporters sent me links to stories of the oldest crystal found on Earth. From the Jack Hills Formation in Australia, a zircon crystal was dated to 4.4 billion years old, claimed to be a mere 165 million years after the Earth formed. Now, this age was found by a very scientific method, and was published in a peer-reviewed journal, so clearly the Earth is 4.4 billion years old, and the biblical timescale of 6,000 years old cannot possibly be correct, right? The zircons are tiny crystals typically found in the Earth's granite basement rock. They are typically only a few human hairs in width, but very tough. Now, inside those crystals, you'll find uranium. If you'll recall, atoms are made up of electrons, protons, and neutrons, and the numbers of each balance out. But some atoms, like uranium or radon, are so heavy they actually have some extra particles, and so they are unstable. Eventually, it will lose a particle or give off energy because it is out of balance. That particle or energy being thrown off is called radiation. If it's a neutron that's thrown off, it's neutron radiation. If the atom throws off an electron, it's called beta radiation. Now, in the case of uranium-238, it eventually throws off a few particles, 2 protons and 2 neutrons. If you'll recall from your high school chemistry and physics, an atom with 2 protons and 2 neutrons is helium. Well, we're all familiar with helium because of the ever-popular helium balloon. So what happens is that the uranium-238 gives off 2 protons and 2 neutrons, an alpha radiation particle, which is helium. The uranium is now lighter and has a different proton and neutron count. Referencing your fancy periodic table from high school chemistry class again, you'll find out that the atom with an atomic number of 236 is thorium. So the element uranium has actually changed into a completely different element and has produced helium gas in the process. But this form of thorium is also unstable and emits a beta radiation, which converts it into protactinium, which gives off a beta particle and turns into a lighter form of uranium called uranium-234. Through a series of breakdowns into different unstable elements, it eventually breaks down into lead-206, which is a stable atom and is not radioactive. You'll notice that we can time how quickly or slowly each of these different elements break down. And so, radioactive dating, or radiodating, was invented for rocks and crystals containing radioactive elements. Now, in the case of zircon crystals, the researchers will gauge how much uranium is in the crystal and how much lead is in the crystal. Now, there are huge problems with the assumptions of radiodating, however. What if some of the atoms inside the zircon crystal leached into or out of the crystal? It completely throws off your date. What if there was already some stable lead inside the crystal when the uranium clock started ticking? Well, that's like starting your stopwatch at 10 hours instead of 0. Again, your clock is completely wrong. I go over these and many other problems in Crevo Rant number 100, Dating Methods. In fact, half the point of this paper on the Australian zircons was trying to determine just how much or how little the elements had moved into or out of the crystal. They also had to acknowledge the possibility that there may have already been lead already in the crystal. Now, it was using these radiodating methods, also called isotopic dating methods, that the researchers came up with their age on the crystal of 4.4 billion years. But wait, when you read through the article, you discover a lot of baseless assumptions. For instance, read carefully what they say about measurements taken within clusters inside the zircon crystal. Within clusters, the lead-207, lead-206 ratios can be measured only by APT and are unusually high, averaging 1.2. if interpreted as a conventional lead-lead model, that is projected from the origin of Figure 2, the 5.5 billion year old result is significantly older than the age of the Earth and clearly not correct. Translation? One dating method gave us an age of 5.5 billion years old, but the Earth is only 4.5 billion years old, so clearly that date has to be wrong. Wait a minute. How do they know how old the Earth is? Science is based upon observation, and there were no observers at the formation of the Earth. Oh wait, yes there was an observer, and he told us in the manual when the formation occurred, and he says it was less than 10,000 years ago. So how then do these researchers allege to know the age of the Earth? Well, I'll tell you how. Radio dating methods. But notice that when the radio dating methods give ages that don't agree with their evolutionarily assigned ages, they reject the dates. They pick and choose the dates that they want. It's circular reasoning. In fact, this entire paper is a classic example of the researchers picking the date they want. Don't believe me? Read the paper. To get that 4.4 billion year date, they sampled over 100,000 zircons, only 4 of which returned an age of 4.4 billion years. And that's in the same crystal. Using the different dating methods, they got ages of 492 million years old, 3.5 billion years old, 4.4 billion years old, and 5.5 billion years old. That's a spread of ages different by a factor of over 11 times. So in order to arrive at the 4.4 billion year old age, they had to ignore over 100,000 samples. They had to ignore multiple age determinations given by various radio dating methods. They had to cherry pick the age that they wanted. Now, interestingly, they were completely silent on the amount of helium contained within the zircon crystals. This is interesting because I'm willing to go on record with a prediction based upon young Earth creation models. You remember how uranium inside the crystal produces helium gas as it breaks down radioactively? It's like there's a little helium generator inside the crystal. But the helium atom is so small that the helium will leak right through the plastic of your birthday balloon. That's why when you get a helium balloon for your birthday, you'll notice that they first squeeze into the balloon a substance affectionately referred to as balloon snot. And yes, that's exactly what it looks like. This paste is to coat the inside of the balloon to slow down the bleeding out of the helium from the balloon, because the atom is so small. So of course, the helium will leak out very, very quickly from inside the zircon crystal. I'm going to predict that if the researchers actually measured the helium inside the zircon crystal, that they would find loads of helium. This is precisely the point that the rate team made with the zircon crystals. The uranium to lead ratio inside the zircons shows billions of years of radioactive decay at today's rates. But yet all of that radioactivity produced a lot of helium inside the crystal. Helium which hadn't yet had time to leach out. So the rate team made 2 predictions for how quickly or how slowly that helium would have to leak out of the crystal. If the rocks were only 6,000 years old, the leakage rate would be around here on the graph. If the rocks were actually 2 billion years old, as the evolutionary theories claimed, then the leakage rate would have to be really slow, here on the graph. The young Earth prediction was 100,000 times faster than the evolutionarily deep time prediction. When they measured the actual rate at which helium leaked out, it was bang on the 6,000 year old prediction. This result demonstrated 2 things. 1, it demonstrated that the Earth was actually only 6,000 years old, not billions of years old. 2, because there had been billions of years worth of radioactivity that had gone on in only 6,000 years, that meant that all these decay rates were considerably faster in the past than they are today. That also means that all of these age estimates, which are based on the decay rates we measure today, are wrong. When you dig into the Australian Zircon's paper and take all things into account, you quickly find out that rather than refuting the biblical age of the Earth at 6,000 years old, the article actually wallows in its own circular arguing and contradictions. This doesn't prove the Earth is billions of years old at all. Stick around. We'll be back in 1 minute.
Oh, not again!
To the horror of both fans and enemies, Ian Juby is back with more ranting goodness.
Okay, Jacques. You first.
Just when you thought his meds had kicked in, Ian goes off on a tangent about what killed the dinosaurs, the origin of life, defining evolution, and yes, even sex. It wasn't enough for an R rating, but nowadays, what is? Volume 4 of his ever-popular and ever-hated Carivo Rants has 8 new short, fast, funny, and hard-hitting episodes. You can get your copy on the soon-to-be-extinct DVD for $15 plus shipping and handling, or purchase the instant digital download of all 8 tracks for just $8. Or you can buy all 4 volumes of his world-infamous rants for the price of 3. Order your copies today and have a party with, like, popcorn and stuff. Visit Ian's bookstore today.
Woohoo! Mail for me?
I started a little project on Question Evolution Day, and unfortunately the shows have been absolutely jam-packed to where I was unable to mention it until now. We want you to propose a question or a comment for evolutionists in the form of a picture. Now this is to hopefully bring about honest discussion with honest evolutionists. Get people thinking and questioning their paradigm. And in the spirit of good scientific study, asking questions of evolutionary theory. So frame your question in a picture and post it to our Facebook page or tweet it to us on Twitter. I'll be compiling submissions on our Facebook page in an album, and I may use your photo in a YouTube video or perhaps even on the television show. Just remember, submitting your photo to our Facebook page or tagging us on Twitter, you are granting us permission to use your photo in our various projects. Now, questions are preferred, but comments are also welcome. A similar project of questions and comments for creationists was posted, and one gentleman posted a poster very similar to this one, with this same thermodynamic formula and saying, if you can't read the above, then you shouldn't be talking about thermodynamics. I turned the poster on its head and pointed out that it's irrelevant whether or not you can read the formula, because thermodynamically speaking, you still cannot have the first life arising from non-life without violating thermodynamic laws. Longtime viewer Oren posted his from Colorado. If mutation is so common, why aren't there vertebrate species which are cyclopses, centaurs, multi-headed, etc.? Matthew Grove sent in his awesome question on Twitter. Why aren't we yet extinct due to our accumulated mutations? Why aren't we dead 100 times over? And of course, that quote is from the title of a paper on genetic mutational load written by an evolutionist. Will deny the science. Guy also asked, why do objects that are said to be billions of years old still have measurable carbon-14 in them? Eric posted an excellent question for Christians who believe in an old Earth. Without original sin by an historical Adam and Eve, for what purpose did Jesus die? Thanks to those who submitted their questions. It's a continuing project. We want to compile as many as possible so you can view the submissions and post your own on our Facebook page at facebook.com/GenesisWeekTV. Now that we had a crash course earlier in the program on radioisotopic dating methods, you'll be able to follow along Cindy's very technical question she sent us on Facebook from her inquiring aunt. Electron spin resonance is not an isotopic analytical technique. Below is a book which explains what it is and how it works. Scroll down to page 45, specifically figure 2.13, where it gives an example of dating petrified wood. Pass this reference on to your contacts. I would like one of them to explain to me, using the scientific language of mathematics, why this dating method doesn't work. I don't want their opinion. Either they can refute these equations or they can't. If they can, then I'm happy to debate them on their work. The link went to a Google Books reference which actually didn't work, but that's okay. The principle of the question still stands. Now, I have to admit, when I first read this, I was like, Electron spin resonance dating? Never heard of it. So I passed the question along to the Creation Research Society Network, which is a network of creation researchers from around the globe. I actually got a response from Dr. Russell Humphreys. And after I read his response, I realized that I had heard of electron spin resonance dating before. In fact, I had had this very discussion with Dr. Russell Humphreys only a few years ago. Evidently, I was suffering from both amnesia and deja vu at the same time, because I was certain that I had forgotten all this before. Anyway, Dr. Russ Humphreys wrote in, "Hi Ian and the rest of you, contrary to the ant's assertion, and despite its exotic sounding name, electron spin resonance is just another method of radioisotope dating. It just uses a different technique to measure the amount of decay that has taken place. When a radioisotope like thorium decays in a fairly pure crystal, say calcite, the radiation it emits knocks electrons in the crystal out of their usual places. These electrons stay out of place for long times. When placed in a magnetic field, the displaced electrons spin at a slightly different rate than the other electrons in the crystal. Applying microwaves then reveals the different rate electrons. The electron spins resonate with the microwaves, and it tells how many of the displaced electrons there are. That tells how much thorium has decayed. Dividing by a rate of decay then gives you an age. You can read more about the method in Principles of Isotope Geology by Gunter Faur." So let me break it down for the lay folk watching this. We already discussed how radioactive elements break down into each other. By measuring how many of the parent and daughter elements there are in the rock, and using the time we know it takes today for those breakdowns to occur, some have attempted to date the rocks. But as we also pointed out, the clock can be dead wrong for multiple reasons, such as the decay rates in the past were obviously faster, therefore the clock ran much faster in the past. There may have been parent or daughter elements added to or taken away from the rock, thus throwing off our clock. This electron spin resonance is just another method of measuring the parent and daughter elements in order to use the radiodating clocks in their usual way. Radiodating clocks which have been shown countless times to be dead wrong. The mathematical equations for calculating the age are completely irrelevant, because it is the assumptions behind the numbers used in the math that are wrong. Thanks for writing in, Sydney. Joseph also wrote in from Alberta. "Hey, loved your show on the Ham-Nye debate. Quick question about the debate you didn't address. What about Nye's objection to the theory of some 7,000 kinds on the ark, which then produced the variety of species we have today, and how there was supposedly no time for them all to evolve in the subsequent 4,500 years after the flood? A resource on the topic would be helpful too if you don't have the time for a full response." Thanks for writing in, Joseph. Yes, that was a point I did not have time to cover in the show. I'll briefly cover it now. Basically, Nye's numbers were completely out to lunch. If you'll recall in the debate, Nye claimed that there was 16 million different species today. Now, he felt this was a conservative figure. Using creationary figures of perhaps 7,000 kinds on board Noah's Ark 4,500 years ago as the ancestors to all of today's species, that would equate to about 11,000 new species arising every day for the past 4,500 years. Now, he of course remarked that surely someone would have noticed that this had been happening. Well, let's go over some quick factoids to understand where Bill went off the rails. Well, first off, his number is outlandish, and I have no idea where he got his figure of 16 million. He said some estimates were as high as 100 million, so he claimed to be very conservative at 16 million. Well, just in 2011, there was a public access paper published in the PLoS Biology Journal, which systematically estimated the number of species on Earth at around 8.7 million. And that included an estimate of species which had not yet been discovered and documented. So from where did Bill get his figure of 16 million? Secondly, the definition of species is extremely vague. For instance, as Dr. Kevin Anderson pointed out, there is allegedly some 1,200 different species of fruit flies just in the Hawaiian Islands. Now, do you really think that there are that many different species of fruit flies? Of course not. It's because the definition of species is incredibly loose. In 2009, there was over 19,000 new species that were discovered or documented in that 1 year alone. So using Nye's very vague definition of species, there is a ridiculous number of new species being documented every year. Some 53 new species every day. So let's use the more realistic Mora paper for our species calculations instead of Bill Nye's outlandish unsupported figures. Of the 8.7 million estimated species, 2.2 million were marine organisms, which obviously would not have been brought on the Ark. Noah was told only to bring animals in which was the breath of life. Of the remaining 6.5 million or so, the vast majority are insects. The Insect Man, Carl Priest, had much to say on the subject of insects taken on the Ark. Now, even if you did bring insects, do you realize how much space insects take up? I mean, good grief, have you ever seen an ant farm? How much space does Noah need to bring thousands upon thousands of insects? Furthermore, most insects would not need to be taken on the Ark. They would survive Noah's flood quite well, either just in the water itself or on floating log and vegetation mats. As Priest points out, there are loads of insects which can even breathe underwater. So, subtracting all of those insects, in the end, today we may be looking at maybe 1.3 million species of Animalia which need to be accounted for, as arising from the 7,000 kinds or so on Noah's Ark. Well, that works out to about 289 new species arising per year for the last 4,500 years. Again, bearing in mind that in 2009 alone, there was over 19,000 new documented species in that 1 year alone. So which scenario is more plausible to suggest? That all of our species arose from 7,000 different kinds of animals 4,500 years ago? Or as Mr. Nye suggests, that all of our species arose from a rock? The biblical account of creation is far more plausible. In the beginning, God created. I'm Ian Juby signing off for now. Remember, you can send us your comments, questions, and hate mail to us in a number of ways. Remember those words from our Creator himself, who said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father except through me." We'll see you next week.
We are a viewer-supported program and need your support to keep this program on the air. Please pray for us, and if you wish to financially support the program, Canadians can make a tax-deductible donation to Core Ottawa, Canada North Post Office Box 72075, Ottawa, Ontario, K2K 2P4. While we cannot offer tax-deductible receipts outside of Canada, donors wishing to financially support the program can do so online at ianjuby.org/donations, and thank you for your support.